Welcome back guys to Caelesti. This is update 0.17 for the Caelesti beta pre-release, and today we're going to be showcasing all of the features added in this new update. Now before I start off this video, I did want to quickly mention 0.17 is the largest update for Caelesti I have ever done. There is more in this update than there has been in any previous update, and I'm hoping that I don't have to work on anything this large for quite a while, because it's kind of been a shame we haven't really had any videos in about a month, so I'm going to try and work on some smaller updates going forward. But in the interest of getting this project out and getting a video out for you guys to see so you can start using some of the features I've made, I've basically rounded off the pack into an almost finished state, and over the next few weeks I'm going to be releasing 0.17.1, 0.17.2 and so on that will add new features that will basically complete all the missing things that are in the pack currently. So for example, one of the new things that's been added in 0.17 is an entire new color map, which works really nicely, but I haven't updated things like water bottles or water buckets or even rain or splash particles or anything else because quite frankly it's a lot of work. Now the pack does work in its current state. There are no broken features or missing textures or anything like that. If there are, which there probably are, please do let me know. But the pack is in a usable state right now, so I'm happy to release it to you guys. Anyway, without further ado, I hope you enjoy this update video. So, starting off with some smaller changes to the More Flora updates. Obviously, this update is about Flora, but we'll be getting to that shortly. We have a few smaller changes that I've been making, and I'm pretty much just writing off these as I've done them in order. So first of all, we have new sounds for the bow and for the crossbow. The bow's sound effect has been modified slightly, and I did this like 4 weeks ago now. This is one of the first changes I made in 0.17, so I'm so used to it now. But a new sound effect for the bow. It's very, very different, but in a very specific way, and you'll hear it if you hear them side by side. But beforehand, the bow was simply using the old school bow sound effect, which is currently used by the dispenser. And that old school bow sound effect sounds a little something like this. Just like that. Now the bow sound effect is still the same sound effect, but it's been sped up and it's had a new sound added to it, which is the kind of like whoosh sound that you hear afterwards. So, shoo, that's like a pew pew. Pew, 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 you know, it's a new bow sound, yay. And obviously the crossbow now has new sounds as well to match. They are very fitting for the crossbow. Just like that, you can hear the sort of flailing of the bowstring on the crossbow, I guess you could say. Now, this was actually a feature that was supposed to be in 0.16, and I think even an earlier release, but unfortunately I discovered a weird bug with the crossbow sound, where the crossbow would basically use the original sound effects even if you had changed the file directory in the sounds.json file. So I have since fixed that by simply filling up all the old sound effects fully so that it would always use a random variant of what are essentially the same sounds. Basically just fixed it now so that the crossbow sound effect actually works. It's similar to the bow in that it has the kind of whooshing sound afterwards, but it's also a little bit different obviously because of the because of like the difference, because it's a crossbow, it's not a bow, it's like a different thing, you know. Up next we have clay. Now this was actually a request from Chroma, and it was actually a very good request, so I'm thankful that someone pointed this out. In the previous update of Caelesti, I changed diorite to be very light and very stony like this, as you can see, and obviously diorite in vanilla Minecraft is very grainy and bitty and itty and gritty, but I like my stones to be very smooth and kind of like blend in with the world if they spawn in like mountains or even other biomes as well. So the problem with that was that clay and diorite were very, very similar, especially if you saw them under pools of water, which is obviously where you find clay usually. They would basically look identical. So there was a bit of a problem there that they weren't really distinguishable enough. Now, in real life, clay is usually darker anyway, so I've simply I've simply drawn a new texture for clay, which is a bit darker, as you can see there, and I think it looks much, much better, and the clay ball goes along with, so I think this actually looks really, really nice. Moving on from that, we have a new texture for the brown mushroom. Now, this is a really simple change. It just simply makes the brown mushroom a little bit better. One thing I've started to really notice while making this pack, and while working on other projects in general, is that when you start a big project, you start off at the beginning with a very little experience, and then the more you go through it, you gain more experience. For me, that's been texturing. I have been sort of like perfecting my style with texturing for a long time now, and I've gotten to a point where I've got like into a style that I really, really enjoy, and I made the brown mushroom texture ages ago. So I've simply updated it, brought it up to scratch, and it now matches more with everything else. It's a bit more color neutral, like kind of this band around the edge actually makes sense now as opposed to it kind of digging into itself up and down and all around, and the bottom texture looks better as well. It's just very basic. We've got a little bit of a dark outline there in case you ever see it from the bottom. This texture is also used on the brown mushroom, which is where you're more likely to see the underneath of the mushrooms there, but you can see it also looks pretty good. And on to the next change, we actually have a new sound effect. Now for this one, I actually must credit someone. They have also been credited in the sounds.json file as well. First of all, credit to for the help with the sound effects for the lightning. Some of you will remember in the last Caelesti update video, I basically said that the thunder sound effects were annoying me a little bit. If you ever heard thunder during the daytime or in a different dimension, or if it wasn't raining for whatever reason, even though that can't really happen in vanilla Minecraft unless you're really high up in the sky, basically the lightning sound effect had rain integrated with it. So if you ever heard lightning, it would also come with rain. Now, I am not really experienced enough to actually remove certain aspects of sounds, so I simply reached out to you guys and said, if any of you know how you would fix this, then please do get in touch with me. Now, a guy called messaged me on Discord on the same day and basically said that he had fixed the sound effects for the thunder, and they now sound spectacular. In all their 20-second long and high megabyte glory. That is the thunder sound effect. Obviously, beforehand, this would have rain overlaid over it, so if you heard a thunder sound effect towards the end of a night, for example, or if you were like high in the sky flying, because obviously rain sounds only occur when they actually hit the ground, so if you're high up and it's raining, you can't hear the rain. So when it thundered, you could briefly hear the rain over the thunder, and it was just a bit crap. It's just not the way it's supposed to be. So he basically just helped me out and just removed the rain sounds from the thunder, so the thunder is now completely clear. I won't play it again, but basically all three of the thunder sounds now have their rain sounds removed, and they sound a lot more clean and they work a lot better. So yes. Now speaking of the texture updates for the brown mushroom, I've also updated our polished brick textures over here. Not polished bricks, what would you call these? Polished stone, I guess? Polished stone, yeah, whatever. So we have polished granite, polished diorite, and polished andesite, and I think they look much nicer now. Now, in a previous update to Caelesti, again, I was still learning my texture system and I didn't really know what was good and what was bad just yet. For this, I have simply taken these and remade them from the ground up. So they now use a more limited palette, which actually looks pretty good in my opinion. However, they actually use the granite, diorite, and andesite texture overlaid on top of them afterwards with partial translucency. So it isn't entirely Jappa, but I think it looks good and I really like it. And as we've discussed in a previous episode, we aren't going for Jappa anymore. I'm just going for whatever I think looks nice, and it's still generally improved from what it was in the past. Now moving on, we have the first aspect of the more Flora update. This is random variants to the grass, tall grass, ferns, and large ferns. I love these. I've only managed to finish up with these today, actually. I made the final large ferns texture before making this video, and I'm really, really pleased with them. So basically, the idea with this is what, a lot of packs do, where they have random textures for the grass. I think actually Skal had random textures for the grass, but it didn't have them for ferns, large ferns, or even tall grass. So basically this has gone one step further. We have 6 different variants for tall grass, 6 different variants for large ferns, some of which are huge, as you can see. We have 8 different variants for the small ferns. Some of these use custom texture maps, which basically go out of the original 16 by 16-bit bounding box. As you can see there, they're a little bit taller, and we also have 8 different variants for the grass texture as well. And whenever you're in a plains biome or a taiga biome, this just adds a ton of variety and makes it look a hell of a lot better. You guys know that I really enjoy improving the natural scenery in Caelesti, and this is kind of what this does. So we have entirely new textures for the ferns that I really like. I think they look really nice. And of course, the grass textures are trying to somewhat mimic vanilla, so they still look a little bit more in place with the vanilla landscape. But I really like both of these. I think they look really, really good. We now have a new texture for emerald as well. Previously, the emerald texture just had a little bit too much contrast based on our other ores, so I've just simply toned it down a bit so that the red, not the red, so that the greens in here look a little bit better. So previously, this green was a bright, bright white, and they were quite vivid on the side tones here as well. So I've simply just taken this area on all 6 sides of all the gems and just simply lowered the contrast so that they're all a bit more green and it looks a little bit more like emerald, basically. So slight change to the emerald ore, but it makes it look much, much better. Moving on from that, we have a new feature for redstone ore. Now, some of you will have seen in Optifine pre-27, emissive was added back to the game, which I'm so pleased about, and as a result of that being the case, we're definitely going to have an entire update dedicated to emissive textures at some point in the near future. But basically, the redstone ore now has emissive textures back on. Yay! That was always in the pack. You could always use that. If you were playing in 1.14, you would have seen that the redstone ore was emissive, but obviously those features are now enabled for 1.15. In addition to that, I've also discovered that redstone actually has a block state that we can play around with, which is just simply lit false. So if it's lit true, it now has an entirely new texture where you can see a tiny bit of a glow around the red parts of the ore, as you can see. You can see there it's very dull and grey around the edges, and if it's turned on, this area around the gemstones actually gets made a bit red. Why can't I click that? There we go. Yeah, so you can see it's kind of like a tiny bit of a red glow around the red, and it's also just more saturated in general as well. So if you're in a deep cave and you light these things up, they look really, really nice and glowy and saturated and bright, and it's fantastic, and I love it. Grass blocks have a new texture in the inventory. Beforehand, the grass was actually really dark green on these before, so I've simply just toned it down a bit so it looks a bit better. And as you can see there, it's a little bit more neutral and looks a little bit nicer in your hand, as you can see. So grass looks a little bit nicer in the inventory. Now for the first controversial change. Obviously, every time I release these kind of updates, there are people who don't like every update, and that's fine. What I would highly recommend you guys doing, if you don't like any feature in Caelesti, is simply downloading it and learning how to like map a resource pack and everything else, picking it apart and just removing the parts that you don't like. You can do that. You know, you're more than welcome to customize a resource pack for your own use. Obviously, if you think it's a good idea to then repost my texture pack with your moderation, with your modifications, that is wrong. I shouldn't need to tell you, but that is wrong. But if you want to download the resource pack and remove anything, then you are more than welcome to. But I love this terracotta texture. A friend of mine who is Zartrix, and I believe Mr. Chocolate, I'm not sure if you guys worked together on this or if it was just a solo project from Zartrix, but still, I thought it was really cool. Zartrix basically picked out this texture from Minecraft Dungeons and decided it would be an amazing texture for the terracotta. So he picked it out and added some variation to it and tweaked it a little bit and added little stones so it fits the vanilla dirt and stuff like that more. And basically, it was the same texture on all 6 sides as terracotta usually is. Now, I saw that and thought, holy shit, this would be so cool if we could imply that like stained clay or terracotta is like layers inside the terracotta, and if you view it from the top, it's the top of one of the layers, you know? So basically there's now a custom top texture, which I made myself, which is used on all the different stained clay variants, as you can see, and I think it looks really, really snazzy. It's really cool. So stained clay is now a hell of a lot darker than it was before, and the intention of this is to give more variety in terms of like colors that you can use in builds. Now, obviously the problem arises, there are some structures in the game that use terracotta in odd places. A good example is the Desert Temple. The Desert Temple has orange terracotta to form the shapes on kind of like the roof of the Desert Temple and the pillars on the sides, and you can also find white terracotta on village houses as well. Now, I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. It actually looks really good on the inside of the Desert Temple because, of course, you can only see the top side texture. But basically, that's just one thing to keep in mind. If you guys want to remove this feature from your Caelesti to make it more universally used, then you're more than welcome to. But I really like this, so we're going to be keeping this going forward. Moving on from that, we have a new jukebox texture for while it's in the inventory, as you can see there. Beforehand, the way it worked is the jukebox model basically had the lid fully open, and it very harshly cut into the above tile and was basically just ugly. There isn't a single other texture in the game that leaves its kind of little bounding box in the inventory. Everything sits quite nicely in its square. So basically, I toyed with the idea of having the jukebox model be closed while it was in your inventory, but then the problem with that was that there was a disc inside it, so I just thought, okay, that's fine, I'll just remove the disc. But then it looked kind of dumb with the roof shut when it was in your inventory, so I created a third entirely separate model where there's no disc and also the roof of the, or what do you even call that, the lid? I guess the lid of the jukebox is like slightly ajar, but it's not entirely open or entirely shut, and I think it looks really nice. So yeah, we have another new diamond texture block. Diamond block texture. I really like it. I think it looks great. I kind of like, you know, I've had some trouble with the diamond block, as you guys may know by now. It's been giving me a lot of trouble. I desperately wanted to make it look as good as the emerald block, which I designed a while back, but also be unique in itself as well, and that was a really difficult chore. Now, emeralds are more square and more hexagonal in the game, as you can see, and I really like this. It's a very obvious square shape in the center of the emerald, so I don't mind having the emerald block be very, very basic and square like this. I think it looks really nice. But the diamond is, of course, more like with like multiple parts to it, with the one big gem in the center and then like lines moving out to the edges, and it looks very different to the emerald, as you can see, and I wanted to try and reflect that as closely as possible with the diamond block. So I set out to design a new texture, and in the end this is the best thing I could come up with, and I actually really like this now. I don't want to speak ahead of myself, but I think this is going to be the final diamond texture we make, because I really like it now. There's been a few failed attempts in the past, quite a few failed attempts in the past, but I really like this one now, and I think we're going to stick with it for sure. Now, finally, before we move on to some of the main Flora update stuff, obviously we've got the Shellmet. I'm going to just give you a second to let that sink in. It's called a Shellmet now. It's called a Shellmet. It's amazing. Oh, I love it. I'd actually like to credit Griff, the runner of Iruna Festival. He's, yeah, that was his idea. I think it's sick. Thank you, Griff. You've done a great service to your mate. So, yeah. It's called a Shellmet. Isn't it amazing? It's great. Okay, yeah, moving on, we're going to go on to some more stuff about the flora. Before we do, though, I just want to quickly say, I have actually been making use of the new feature with YouTube where you can actually have chapters on videos. So if you guys are making use of those or appreciate those, then please do let me know. I think they're really cool. I like them. But it would be nice to know if you guys use them because they're actually, you know, I think they're really good. I'd just like to talk about it. So yeah, message me. Let me know if you use the chapters. Speaking of chapters, this chapter is about to end. So for the final stage of this video, we're actually going to be jumping into Biome Loader, which is the custom CTM and color map testing world that I made a little while ago. Some of you may have seen the showcase for Biome Loader already. I wouldn't be surprised if people weren't really sure of what it was actually supposed to be used for, but basically this is what I made it for. I had some people obviously saying that like Biome Loader is not that helpful, it's kind of useless, but whatever. I like it, I use it, and it's really helpful for the things that I've been doing, so hopefully you guys can get a better idea of what the actual purpose of it is by seeing this right here. So, the better flora update, or more flora update, or probably just the flora update as I'm going to be calling it. As you can see here, it's not finished yet. I haven't done sunflowers, lilacs, rose bushes, or peonies. I've actually done that now. So there are a few things that are work in progress, and honestly, a lot of this is subject to change. I have a few ideas in mind already of what needs to be changed in the future, but we're going to be getting over to that in just a second. So first of all, we've already been over the grass and the ferns. You can see here, I've been testing out the grass and the ferns as well, especially in every biome. We all have biome-dependent grass and ferns, so they look nice in every setting, which is really cool. But we now have new custom unique models for every single flower. And oh boy, this took some time. So, but yeah, as you can see here, a lot of work has gone into this, and a lot of it's going to be changed in the future, no doubt. So first of all, we have dandelions. Now, dandelions have a pretty cool texture. It's a very cool 3D model, as you can see here. It's got a cross texture in the center, separate panes for each of the flowers, and also a bit of a bushy area for like kind of weeds, I guess you could say, at the bottom of the texture, which I think looks really good as well. Now, for every single one of these flowers, they've actually been given random orientation per block. So every single one has a random orientation of either 90, 180, or 270 degrees, which basically means that when you place them in large fields like this, it doesn't look repetitive, it looks really nicely, they tile really good, and you can basically just have huge fields of all these flowers, and they hopefully should look really nice. So yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. I'm now thinking, do I talk about all of these in detail? Probably not. Okay, we have poppies. Poppies are cool. They're flat and wide, and they tile nicely. As you can see, it looks pretty good. I really like poppies. Poppies are actually one of my favorite ones in this entire update, so I do really like these. We have blue orchids, which have now been renamed to sapphire orchids, as you can see, which is more accurate to what they're referred to in real life. They have a pretty cool texture. Again, it's just a cross model in the center, but with a few additional diagonal panes, as you can see here, going across to add a bit more depth to the texture, especially when you're looking at it from certain angles. I think it looks pretty cool. We have allium, which is pretty neat as well. Now, allium usually in real life grows very, very strangely. It's like a circular bulb on top, which we obviously can't really replicate well in Minecraft. But you also have these very thin and very straight up stems like that as well. So I think that looks really good. Again, the whole point of this texture is that it tiles nicely. So if you have a lot of these things in a quick succession, then they actually look really nice in big clusters. Azure Bluet was actually the first one I designed. It uses a very similar model to the poppies, as you can see. We have this quite wide cross area at the bottom, but then raised up a little bit higher, we have the flowers on the top. And again, the whole point of this is that they tile really nicely. So if you have a huge field of Azure Bluets, then they're going to look really, really nice. Moving on from that, we have a custom model for tulips. Now, all the tulips share the same model. I actually only just realized very recently that in vanilla Minecraft, the tulips actually have identical... not the opposite of identical. They have unique textures, which is really strange. But obviously, I haven't changed the item textures for these yet, which is one of the things I mean to discuss shortly. But as you can see here, they're actually all different. Every single tulip texture is different. I'm pretty sure the white and the red are just reversed, and maybe even the orange and the pink. Well, their stems, I mean. But it's interesting to see. I always just kind of assumed they were the same texture, but they're actually not, which is kind of weird. These ones are the first ones that are a bit whack. Again, I made these very early into the process, and I'm not entirely happy with them. But they grow on you, and especially when you see them in like a natural environment, like a plains biome or a mountain or a forest or anything else, they actually look really nice, and I'd really like them in that setting. When they're kind of like this, when they're next to everything else, they look a bit out of place, but I don't know. I don't hate it. They're not terrible at all. Maybe I'll release like a video at the end of when 0.17 is actually fully completed. I might release like a showcase type cinematic, what I've done for the the color maps and the skyboxes in previous showcases. So maybe we'll do something like that. But yeah, moving on from that, we have Oxeye Daisies, and the only textures in the game that don't have a unique model. Oxeye Daisies and Cornflowers currently use the exact same model, as you can see there. It's basically just like the 3 separate smaller stems and then the wider large flower on top. Now, I haven't really been able to think of anything unique for Cornflowers, but I like this. It's not terrible. Some of you will probably be thinking right now, why the hell are some of these so dark? That isn't me. That's Minecraft being whack. So, unfortunately, there's a problem with complex 3D crosses where certain faces look kind of crap. The weird thing is, and I wouldn't usually recommend this, but if you play with shaders, this problem doesn't happen. They're all lit up nicely and properly. So maybe you want to play with shaders? I don't know. But again, it's something that you never really notice in a natural environment. If you're only playing in a regular vanilla world, it's usually not a problem at all. And onwards from that, we have the Lily of the Valley, which is the texture that we designed on stream last week. Again, this one is subject to change. I really like it, honestly. I do really like it, but I've had a lot of people telling me that it doesn't look that good and that it's not even close to what they should look like in real life. So I'm probably going to change this one as well. I think for this one, what I'm going to do in the future is make it so that it's more one-sided, so that, when you place it down, it's not like there's lilies growing out in all 4 directions. It's probably there's only going to be like one stem and then mostly large leaves behind it, and of course that can rotate round, so we can have multiple different varieties of this thing. So I've got plans to make this thing a little bit better and a little bit more realistic in the future, but for now I do like this. And again, the pack is currently playable. 0.17 is a work in progress, but it is now available to download if you really want to. Onwards from that, we have Wither Roses. As you can see, a pretty basic change. Again, it's kind of similar to the allium, where it's because we can't really have a spherical head for the flower. I've just kind of given it like a cube shape, so it's Minecrafty. And of course, the Wither Rose is actually really neutral, so it just shares the same texture for every single biome. And I think it looks really good. I think it's kind of cool that all these flowers come in patches now. I really like the idea of flower patches instead of the individual flowers. But we'll be talking a little bit more about that in just a second. So obviously, you guys have already seen the mushrooms, and obviously we now have the dead bush texture, which is a random variant texture. I should have really set up a little patch for these things, but you can trust me. It's basically the same as the small grass textures, but they're made to be brown and like with a few pixels removed. And the idea is that the dead bush is actually grass which is dried up, and it looks really good in Badlands and also deserts as well. And I think it looks much better than the usual thing that you would find. So onwards from that, we have lily pads. Now, lily pads actually have the most variation of any of the models that I've shown you so far. As well as having 4 variations, they also have a 1 in 10 chance of having the actual lily on top of them. Obviously, they're called lily pads. None of them have lilies usually, which is a bit strange. And lily pads also now have a new feature where they have roots growing underneath the water. And this looks great in swamps. Those sounds are so annoying. I should do something with that, shouldn't I? Never mind, maybe in the future. But yeah, the roots growing in swamps look really good. You know, if you're in a swamp, you just see this kind of structure underneath the lily pads, and it looks really good. The only problem is, if it's in deep water, it looks really dumb, because of course the root isn't actually attached to anything, but there's nothing I can really do about that, unfortunately. There's not even any sort of height variance that I can give to it, so unfortunately this is just what we've got to stick with for now. But I think it looks really good still, and I really like the idea of having a root underneath it, because I never liked how lily pads were just sort of floating on top of the water. Another change that's going to be made, by the way, the lily pad model is currently wrong, so they actually float very far up from where the water level is. They also float really far up in vanilla, but someone basically pointed out to me, they said those lily pads are like floating. They shouldn't be a whole 2 pixels above the water. I can't get a good angle now, can I? Can I like land at a good height? Let's see if I can. Yes, there we go. So yeah, as you can see here, the lily pads are actually floating really far above the water, which is not what I want to be. So I'm probably going to lower them down by a good 2 pixels, but that means changing this texture of the stem, which is something that I want to do anyway, changing the position of the lily and the lily pad. Basically, there's a lot to do with that as well, so that's going to be probably coming in 0.17.1 in the next few days, or maybe the next week or so. Onwards from that, we don't have new textures yet for the sunflower, lilac, rosebush, or peony, like I mentioned, so those things are currently, unchanged, which is kind of a shame, but that's just the way it is. I'm going to add new textures textures for these things and new unique models in the future, but obviously I'm a little bit burned out on the unique models department because there's only so much variety you can really do when you have so little to work with. So I've got a few ideas in mind for the sunflower and even the lilac, but for the rosebush and the peony, I am stumped, dude. There's not a lot you can do with these things. It just starts to get boring very quickly. So hopefully we'll come back to these in the future and they should be better. So yeah, obviously we've already showcased the long grass and the large ferns. The large ferns are humongous now and I love it. But we now have vertical CTM for vines. I feel like it's a very staple thing for every Optifine base pack to have vertical CTM for vines. It's a very basic feature. Basically, if a vine is at the bottom of a vine stack, as you can see here, it has a sort of like rounded off end texture as opposed to stretching fully down to the edge of the block. So it's a very, very simple change on the vanilla texture. And I think it just looks really nice. It just adds a little bit extra to jungle trees and it looks pretty snazzy. Now, why are we in Biome Loader and why has this taken me a month to finish? Well, let me show you. Yeah, this is pretty whack. So what if I told you that all of the flowers are biome dependent? First of all, I bet you'd go, oh, you figured out some way of doing color maps for flowers. Look, they've got dark stems in this biome because it's a dark biome. And over here in the swamp, they have, just get to the swamp a bit faster, there we go. Over in the swamp, they have like brown stems and they look a bit muddy sometimes. You know, did you find a way to do color maps for flowers? No, I didn't. I have used CTM Replace to make custom textures for every single flower for every single biome. So there are 7 different variants of every flower. There is a cold variant, a dark variant, swamp, vivid, savanna, and desert. And we're going to go through all of them right now. Some of them are a little bit difficult to locate because there's such a huge variety of biomes, but we'll go through them as best we can. So obviously all the ones that you've already seen over here, which share the same kind of like basic green, those are the basic flowers. And this is actually an ocean biome, so it doesn't look too amazing. But over here we have the plains biome, and you can see it matches up with the grass much nicer. For reference, here is the lime green that every flower was before. So this is the contrast that we had beforehand. This ridiculous vivid lime green against the, you know, now very dull and very sort of like realistic green grass. So all the flowers sort of match up much nicer with their surrounding foliage and they look a lot better in their respective biomes. Over here we have desert, so you can see for the desert flowers, they're all dried up and browned and they look like they've died in the sun, and that's exactly how I want it to look, and it looks amazing whenever you're in a desert on like the edge where flowers are formed or whatever else like that. Here we have mountains. Mountains are much darker. There are a number of biomes that count as dark biomes. I believe the ones that count as dark biomes are generally mountains, tigers, dark forest, and something else. There are others as well. It's kind of difficult to say. A lot of the things with the different color, you know, per flower, it's usually more generalized because, you know, I could make a custom texture for all 80 odd biomes in the game, but that would take me ages. So I think 6 variants is good enough, and I feel like I've covered as much ground as possible. So we have dark variants here. You can see they blend in with the grass really nicely, especially in the mountains biomes. Next up, we'll go to the swamp. So obviously you saw before, they're sort of brown and a bit muddy, especially the allium. It looks very dirty and muddy, and I think it looks amazing. Obviously, blue orchids fit in really nicely here. They almost perfectly blend in with the grass. So blue orchids do actually have a like the more green plains texture in vanilla. So you'll only get the blue orchids that actually fit into swamps if you are using Optifine, but I would hope that everyone is using Optifine by this point, so it's not really that big of a deal. Now, cold flowers are more interesting. I really like how cold flowers look. Because they have a lot of unique properties. Now, first of all, cold flowers use the similar, again, very dull grey-green texture for the stems, similar to what the grass uses, but also every single flower head has had its saturation decreased and brightened, so it looks a little bit more like it's a bit cold or frozen over or whatever else. But we also have new textures for the poppies and also for the dandelions as well. Now, again, this is a work in progress. Someone recommended to me this shape for how to make a good kind of, you know, cubey spherical shape, but I have a feeling I'm going to be switching to this in the future because I think this is sort of like the theme that we've gone for, and this doesn't really fit anymore. But yeah, so here we have Icelandic poppies. Now, poppies are really cool. I already really like poppies, and someone recommended the idea of having poppies look different in cold biomes. So I looked online, and it turns out there's actually a huge variety of different poppies that you can get. Icelandic poppies come in the varieties of different reds and oranges and pinks, and I think they look really nice. So if you ever get poppies in a cold biome, then they will have a huge variety of colors and look really cool, as you can see there. And also dandelions will look like they are when they're, you know, it's in like when they're seeds. You know, dandelions sometimes look like seeds. So it works perfectly for cold biomes, right? Because it fits in with the color scheme. I think it looks really nice. And onwards from that, we have Savanna and also Vivid. Vivid is whenever you're in a mushroom biome. Mushroom biomes are super bright green now. They used to have purple grass, but that's been removed, and I've actually changed a lot of the color maps. Some of you will remember in a previous update, there was like very red grass in the nether and very purple grass in the end. That's been removed entirely, and it's just been replaced with like a more neutral or desert type color map, respective of the dimension. So that's hopefully a little bit better now. I'm now realizing we're going to have to do a whole bunch of new biome stuff when 1.16 comes out, because all the new biomes are in the nether. But yeah. But as you can see here, yeah, the Mushroom Island biomes are really cool. They're very vivid and very alpha green, as you can see. I feel like a lot of people have done this by now, but I thought it was a neat idea. Basically, the idea that, like, Mushroom Islands, when you actually grow grass and flowers on them and stuff like that, it ends up looking a bit more like retro vanilla Minecraft, where everything's highly saturated and highly crazy. And as you can see here by the reds and the oranges and the pinks of these tulips, they're very highly saturated, and I think it looks really, really nice. Onwards from that, we have Savanna. Now, savannas have also had an update of their own. Whenever you would find a savanna plateau now, it's a tiny bit more green than the regular savanna. So the regular savanna is this kind of like very dull, very yellowy brown texture that you would expect from a savanna, but savanna plateaus have a little bit more green to them, and it looks really nice when you're in a big savanna type biome. So that's pretty cool. But yeah. As you can see here, similar effects with the savanna flowers as with the desert flowers. They're just very, very dull and very brown and very grey. And it looks like they've kind of like dried up in the sun as well, and I think it looks really good. So basically now, I have not had to have the problem of making a color-neutral flower which fits in every biome. The biome fits to the color, so it's really cool. You know, we have all these different variants of flowers that look really good if you're playing with Optifine. And generally, you'll find this happens the most whenever you're in like mountains or cold biomes, because of course you always do get a lot of flowers spawning there, and they usually look a bit out of place in vanilla, but now they should look a lot more in place because of course the stems match up with the grass color underneath them, so it's really cool. Now, this took a lot of time to do because every single model that you can see here has like a huge process to creating it. So let's just take the dandelions, for example. Okay. So first of all, how this works out is I make the base textures for this, a kind of rough idea of what I want it to be like, and then I make the model, apply the textures to it that at this point are just like solid black or solid red or solid blue, and then afterwards I apply the colors and try and make a nice looking texture for it. After that's finished, I then go into the CTM properties, and I have to remake the textures 6 different times for all the different biomes that I've named. So again, cold, dark, swamp, vivid, desert, and savanna, 6 different colors. So there are 7 different varieties of every single flower that you can see here. So obviously in the future, when I do get around to making these, it's going to be a little bit more time consuming because they are bigger, and some of these have like really vivid colors and look really good. But like I said, I've already got ideas in mind, and we're probably going to get on with that in the next few weeks or so. So hopefully it should be good. But yeah, anyway. So that pretty much concludes it for version 0.17 of Caelesti. This update feels like it's not actually that big, but trust me, it is. If you're playing in a regular survival world, you will really notice a lot of these changes. We have updated color maps for all the grass textures and some of the trees, as well as updated color maps for water. And of course, we now have all of the different biome CTM for the flowers as well. So everything is looking very different to what it was before. And trust me, your worlds are hugely improved when you're exploring them in vanilla survival. So what do the future updates look like? So as I explained at the start of this episode, 0.17 is going to be a new type of release. I am intentionally releasing this unfinished. There are a lot of things to do. You may have realized in this episode that obviously the item textures for all the flowers haven't yet been done. They're all still the vanilla textures. The flower pot variants of all these flowers have not yet been done. Again, that's another huge thing that I kind of can't be arsed starting yet, but I promise I'll do it in the future. And obviously we haven't even finished half of these things as well. I have plans to update the color maps more. I have plans to remake half of these models. I have plans to change how the leaves work on a huge scale. There are a lot of things I want to do. And honestly, they're all very time consuming. It's really nice for me just simply making a new item texture or a new block texture and calling it a day. This is one of those huge projects that I only really have to do once and then it's done, and it will be hugely game changing in the future. I feel like I'm the first person to really like do this on a massive scale, and I really like that. But basically, yeah, all the flowers are now biome dependent. I've wanted to do this for a long time and I've finally done it. But again, there are things that have not yet been done. ideas that come to mind. I haven't done cactus, I haven't done sugarcane, I haven't done wheat, I haven't done carrots, potatoes, beetroots, pumpkins, melons. There's a lot of things which really count as flora, which I haven't really done yet, and I have a lot of ideas in mind for what we could do going forward. But yeah, for now, the pack is playable, and I really like it. It works really nicely in survival. When you're exploring around, the world looks so much better than it did before, mainly just because whenever you find flowers, they don't just stand out as lime green, you know? Like, they actually match the grass. It makes such a difference. But yeah, anyway, hopefully you enjoyed, and hopefully you look forward to the upcoming updates for Caelesti. I promise I'm not doing this just to get more CurseForge downloads. It's actually for my own sanity, so you can trust me on that. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. And remember to download Caelesti from CurseForge, and let me know if you do encounter any bugs or errors with the new features in this update, or any features in Caelesti for that matter. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.